This is Action News with Rick Martell, Missy Hobson, Dave Silver has sports, and Nancy Bauer with the weather.
KSBY TV. And now, KSBY Action News at 6 with Rick Martell, Sandra Moss, and Mitch Massey on sports.
KSBY 6. Informed, involved, in touch with Lynn Deal.
The news starts now. Live from the most watched station on the Central Coast, KSBY 6. This is Action News at 6. Live from the original news channel, this is KSBY 6, Action News Nightside.
Live from the new broadcast center on the Central Coast, this is KSBY 6 Action News at 6 with Tony Capola, Jennifer Mandalay. Celebrating 70 years in your community. This is a special anniversary edition of KSBY News.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this special 70-year edition of KSBY News. I'm Richard Gearhart.
And I'm Nina Lozano, and we are honored to be commemorating this milestone alongside you, our viewers. Without you, these past 7 decades would not have been made possible.
That's right. So sit back, relax with us as we take a trip down memory lane.
KSBY TV was the first local television station to hit the airwaves on the Central Coast. Now, during the past 70 years, much has changed, but the mission has not: to inform and entertain the community.
I had the honor of speaking with a few people who have worked at KSBY over the years and heard their perspectives. Russ James began working as a morning host on KVEC radio in 1952 and spent his afternoons working to start the area's first TV station. It was May 25th, 1953, when KVEC TV broadcast a signal for the first time.
But when we first turned it on and saw that test pattern, for myself and from Charlie Mitchell, we looked at that thing and I said, "Charlie, what do you think?" He said, "I think we got it working." So we had it working. I guess it's been working ever since.
The new television signal was coming from atop Cuesta Peak, the only location high enough to reach residents around San Luis Obispo County.
The test pattern was on. Les Hacker was watching from way down where he lives. And we said, "Are you ready to see it?" "I've been ready all day," he said. So we put on Hopalong Cassidy, and he really liked that.
And just like that, a new television station was born. The KVEC call letters stood for Valley Electric Company, whose owners wanted to be able to sell television sets. The first broadcasts consisted mostly of the Hopalong Cassidy movies, but eventually local shows made it to the airwaves.
We started a morning program of just talking to people, and it I forget what the name it was, but we had a sort of we'd have a cooking show at one time. We had a Western band, local Western band, just anything to fill up time.
Those early shows were filmed and edited at the station's location on Hill Street, but to air them, someone had to make the treacherous drive up to the peak, oftentimes requiring a four-wheel drive Jeep. The station was sold 4 years later and became KSBY TV. That ended much of the local programming, with the station instead rebroadcasting a signal from Salinas. Dave Garth was hired as the news director and a reporter in 1969.
Gradually, they decided they could do a local newscast, but the trick was there was no way to broadcast from downtown San Luis. So the only way to do the show was to actually drive up to the transmitter site on Cuesta Peak. And most people don't know, but it's a pretty treacherous road.
Garth says it's the connection between the station and the community that gives local television such a big impact.
KSBY was part of the glue that held the community together, that common experience. And I think that's still the case. Maybe less so with social media and all the various ways that people can experience. But in terms of local news, it's that local joint news experience, I think, that helps make a community, and I think that hasn't changed.
Over the past 70 years, the faces may have changed, but the goal has not. Local television, and especially local news, hold a community together and hold it accountable.
Starting in 1985, we were in an expansion mode, both as a community here in San Luis Obispo, Santa Maria, Santa Barbara, and also KSBY was in an expansion mode. We had a great sales staff, we had great management, we had lots of really great reporters and producers. Everyone was here, and they were not only expanding, but they were digging a little deeper.
Lynn Deal is a familiar face who kept the Central Coast informed during the 80s and 90s.
One man said, "I've been waiting 40 years for this." If you are of the people, if you live here and you made friends and you got to know everybody, you're embraced by the community. That's the most important thing about the stories that you're doing on these anniversaries, because even though KSBY thrived, it was because of its connection to the community.
I have been a part of KSBY for more than a third of its time on the air. As I reflected with those who'd come before me, we all agree, from the man who quite literally turned the station on for the first time to those who bring you the news each night right now, what has changed is the technology that allows you to keep up with the changes in your community. What has not changed is the need to know about and connect with your community.
Do you think television is still as important today as it was then?
I think it's more important right now, especially local TV. I think it just has to be.
Oh, I love that. I learned a lot about KSBY in that story. Richard, you said you've been here 27 years. Is that right?
Yeah, yep.
Wow, well, it's a lot of accomplishments in and of itself already. And even before you arrived, KSBY had 43 years under its belt. That's making many changes along the way as well.
Yeah, just to put it in perspective, this right behind us are all of the different logos that KSBY has had over the past 70 years. And the one right next to you back there, that 6, is the one that was on when I started. The one that was here when we first moved up to this building was right here, and then shortly after we became the Spirit of the Central Coast. So we've gone through lots of iterations. And another fun fact, this month also marks 24 years when we actually moved to this particular spot where we are right now, the station on the hill in San Luis Obispo.
And now let's take a look back at our first newscast here in 1999 with a little tour of what the station looked like back then.
This is the nerve center of the newscast, and I probably should be quiet. No, you know, on the other hand, I don't have to be quiet because it's all about me, right? Okay, here's the director, Brandon. And Brandon, I just want to know what happens if I press this button.
You're fired.
Okay, good enough. Over here is Connie, our producer. Connie is the person who decides which stories go on the air and in which order. She writes some of them.
Yeah, and 15 seconds.
Oh, I was going to ask you, how are we doing on time? She's also the timekeeper, and it looks like I'm running out of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Jill Rickett, who's standing by in the studio. Do I need to give you the microphone, Jill? I think I do. Here we go.
I think you do, and you know, I have always wanted to be a tour guide, and hi, I guess we're taking a whole nother camera. Now, I'm going to show you the studio and the set, but right away, I think you already know these two. Now, Tony and Jen, you don't mind if I show off the place a little bit, do you?
Please.
Great, because the set itself is very, very unique, and I want to tell you a little bit about it. It actually moves for different shows, so it gives the viewer different backgrounds. And much to the dismay of Tony, there is no mini bar or salad bar
Shoot,
on
I know.
the set. Now, many of you know that big green wall is for Sharon's weather wall, and wherever there is green, we can put any kind of picture imaginable. We basically can electronically paint the wall. You also saw our camera people and working hard, getting crystal clear shots. Thank you, RJ and Carolyn. I think I've got time to take you into the newsroom, so follow me if you would, Brett. And this is the new KSBY newsroom. We are very excited to show off our modern, state-of-the-art place. Lots of computers, lots of monitors on the wall. Actually, we have some 100 monitors in this building total, and lots of people working hard on their scripts for the 11 o'clock show too, I think. I see Ty Ray and some other folks over there. This is our assignment desk. Over here, this is kind of the nucleus of the newsroom, you could say. We have police scanners, computers, the phones, the faxes, they all come into one place, and this is the assignment editor's desk, and she sees what news goes on our shows and how to cover those different stories. Also, the weather office. And Sharon, you're working hard. Can you give us a wave? Sharon's in her weather office.
It has certainly been so fun to see how things have changed over time. And not only does KSBY have a long history, but so does the Central Coast.
Did you know that some of the landmarks people associate with San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties were only established in the past 70 years? Let me take you back in time.
You like ice, I like ice, everybody likes ice.
The 1950s.
Smokey the Bear.
The golden age of television.
Your information is confidential.
1953 saw the on-air debut of the Central Coast's first TV station, KVEC, or what we now call
KSBY News.
The years that followed marked a lot of development on the Central Coast. I went to the History Center of San Luis Obispo to find out more.
So going back 150 years, we were a tiny little rural community. Fast forward to the 50s, it was starting to develop more.
Executive Director Thomas Kessler showed me these aerial photos of the Atascadero State Hospital from the 60s. The psychiatric facility opened in 1954.
It was a source of jobs from a steady, reliable source from the state government. It was a sign that we really were a part of the state.
Fast forward to 1958, when Hearst Castle in San Simeon became a state park and open to the public. The vast estate of newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst boasts hundreds of rooms, gardens, terraces, pools, legendary art collections, and a now defunct private zoo.
Hearst Castle is the #1 visited state park of California. It's also the biggest revenue generator for the state parks. So it's a big deal, and the fact that it's in our county helps us.
In 1985, following nearly 15 years of protests, hearings, and court cases, PG&E began operating Unit 1 of the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant along the coast near Avila Beach. The nuclear power plant has been controversial from the start.
September 1st, 1981, the 20-day blockade at Diablo Canyon, 600 police officers arrested nearly 2,000.
So this book came out pretty much right away, documenting the process that had taken place of peaceful, nonviolent protest, but blocking the paths and making sure that their voices had to be heard.
Heading south from San Luis Obispo County to Santa Barbara County, I met with Judith Dale, former mayor of Buellton. She's written a series of newspaper articles showcasing Santa Barbara County's colorful history. Completed the same year KSBY first hit the airwaves in 1953, Kachuma Dam, renamed Bradbury Dam in 1971. It's a primary water source for the South Coast communities of Santa Barbara, Goleta, Montecito, and Carpinteria.
Bureau of Reclamation made a deal, so they have to keep the water level at a certain height. And Kachuma is a plus, #1 for recreation for the area, but also obviously for flood control and for water.
Also during the 50s in Santa Barbara County.
Originally an Army base named Camp Cook, Vandenberg was converted to a missile test launch facility in 1957.
A year later, it was redesignated as Vandenberg Air Force Base. In 2021, it was renamed Vandenberg Space Force Base.
Without Vandenberg Air Force Base, my family wouldn't have been as prosperous as it is, because at the time we owned a nursery, and we landscaped and sold nursery plants to many of the houses in Vandenberg Village. So it was definitely an economic boom to this area.
The unique geographic location of Vandenberg makes it a safe and ideal setting to test intercontinental ballistic missiles and launch satellite payloads into polar Earth orbit.
It's definitely a major economic driver, as well as defense driver in the county, as well as the state, as well as the nation.
December 16, 1958, Vandenberg sent its first missile up into the sky.
IRBM Thor 151
the first missile to be launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base.
And the rest.
And liftoff of Starlink 2.4. Go Falcon, go Starlink.
Is history. Now, those are just a few events and places that shaped the Central Coast.
KSBY anchor Janelle Padilla takes a look at other milestones that have made our region so special in the last 70 years.
1953, a special year on the Central Coast. KSBY launching its first newscast in San Luis Obispo is just one of the major milestones seen that year. Let's start our trip down memory lane at the corner of Broad and Monterey Streets in downtown SLO.
Our role is to collect, preserve, and educate the community about San Luis Obispo County's history.
The Historical Society of San Luis Obispo was founded as a nonprofit to take ownership of the historical site Dalladea Adobian Gardens, which was deeded to the organization in 1953. The nonprofit now operates it and runs the nearby museum that houses thousands of artifacts from our region. Camp San Luis Obispo is the original home of the California Army National Guard. It too had a notable year in '53, serving as a training ground during the Korean War.
In 1953, this was the Southwest Signal Training Center. They had a basic training group where draftees and enlistees would come here for their basic training.
The war ended that year, leading to Camp SLO closing the signal training facilities. A lot of training still occurs at Camp SLO, serving as a schoolhouse installation and officer candidate schools, with a notable alum, Tom Selleck. From our military to our first responders, San Luis Obispo's oldest fire station was built in 1953 as well.
Welcome to Fire Station number 2. We don't get too much sleep due to Cal Poly.
On the corner of Chorro and Foothill, Fire Station 2 was one of the busier stations in the city. From the low ceilings to the original cabinetry, Station 2 has kept its 50s charm.
All apparatus are getting larger.
Everything's getting bigger and
Everything's
better.
getting bigger, yeah. But the station stays the same. It feels like our house rather than a fire station. The fact that it's small and all of us are together quite a bit, you can't get away from each other.
It just reminds me of my grandma's house.
I love the fact that it hasn't changed.
Heading north to Morro Bay. In the early 50s, there were major changes in the works.
1953 was a big year in the city of Morro Bay, not only with the creation of the city's first wastewater plant, but also the beginning of construction on what would forever change the city's iconic skyline.
Before the 50s, I mean, this was just dune lands here. And the only facilities that people had for sewage disposal would have been septic systems.
The old plant served the city well for decades, but couldn't meet current flow standards. It was completely decommissioned in late 2022, and a new plant is now operating on South Bay Boulevard. And about a 15-minute walk down the Embarcadero.
You can't miss the 3 stacks that make up Morro Bay's iconic skyline. I'm standing in front of the very first one ever constructed back in 1953.
The Morro Bay power plant was first run on oil, then natural gas before shutting down in 2014. Vistra Energy now owns the stacks and plans on tearing them down in the coming years. We wrap up our highlights with a local favorite. Shaw's Steakhouse moved into Santa Maria in 1953. The restaurant prides itself on its history and perfecting the dish the city is known for.
This is the one place where you can come and get the Santa Maria style barbecue there every day.
Shaw's was heavily damaged during a fire in January of 2019, but with the support of the community, the restaurant rebuilt and reopened 2 years later, and they say it's better than ever.
Janelle Padilla, KSBY News.
And stay with us because the nostalgia is not over just yet.
Covering like my first Paso Robles Atascadero rivalry game, Arroyo Grande SLO, Cal Poly UCSB, it just became something that I was excited and proud to be a part of, as cheesy as it sounds.
A look back at some of the most significant sports moments on the Central Coast and those who reported on them. As we continue to celebrate 70 years of KSBY, there have been many community-defining sports moments throughout our area in the last 7 decades.
Local athletes won gold medals in the Olympics, gone to Super Bowls, or started in their roles here in college at Cal Poly and UCSB.
From 1983 to 1994, KSBY Sports Director Mitch Massey captivated audiences. And from 2004 to 2013, Sports Director Andrew Masuda was the boots on the ground for local coverage.
For both of them, the rivalries like Paso Robles and Atascadero made the job special, watching communities flock to a football field on a Friday night. With near 20 years combined at the helm of the sports department, the baseline function for both Masuda and Massey was to connect with the communities and cover what was important to them.
Whether you're 80 years old or, you know, a freshman in high school, people come to accept and kind of appreciate.
In my case, the duration of time being here, I would do a story on someone who, let's say, is 6, and now by the time they're 18 or where they've evolved as a college, you get to go on this journey with them.
The impact of our station's sports coverage has also left its impact on the area. For example, in 1990, UC Santa Barbara took down #1 ranked UNLV. Massey would be the one to first call the Gauchos basketball facility the Thunderdome, which is what it remains to this day.
Or in 2008, when the world watched the Beijing Olympics, while Masuda highlighted the likes of Jason Lezak, Gina Miles, and Stephanie Brown-Trafton. All sports moments on the Central Coast, and we'll be right back.
The Central Coast is no stranger to bad weather.
In the 70 years KSBY has been on the air, the area has seen everything from extreme cold conditions with snow to blazing hot temperatures to the extremes of drought and swells of flooding.
In KSBY, Chief Meteorologist Dave Hovde ranked some of the most significant weather events, and this is what he came up with. The very hot and windy conditions that preceded the Thomas Fire in December 2017. Dave says this was a time where the region was extremely dry.
When the rains came a month later, the land couldn't hold, causing the Montecito mudslide. 23 people died.
Dave says the flooding of 1969 is an epic weather event people will never forget. At the time, it was called the 100-year flood. Another 100-year flood struck in 1973, another in 1995, and of course, this year's event on January 9th. The area with feet of rain in just a few days, leading to several deaths and damaged infrastructure. Despite the misery, there was benefit. The drought ended in California.
Snow is very rare, and this year saw snowfall on the Cuesta Grade. Another snow event happened in 1989 with snow in northern San Luis Obispo County. You can find Dave's full story at ksby.com.
And stay right there. We've saved the best for last.
Step into the time machine as we take a look back at what life was like in 1953 compared to life now. The U.S. was at the tail end of the Korean War. Peter Pan was at the top of the box office, and gas was just 27 cents a gallon.
Life was a bit different back in 1953. KSBY's DLA Bear takes us back to what life was like when KSBY came on the air for the first time.
The percentage of people who own a vehicle in the U.S. today is nearly 3 times higher compared to 1953. But for those who wanted to ride in style 70 years ago, it might have looked a little like this and sounded a little like this. That hot ride could have taken you to Marion's drive-in restaurant for a double burger and a thick milkshake, all for just 69 cents, or to a Cal Poly football game. The Mustangs went 9-0 in their last of 2 undefeated seasons in the past century. It was a different style of football then. No face masks, little to no padding, and just look at those old school jerseys. College was a bit cheaper then too. Students living on the Cal Poly campus paid an estimated $375 per year. Compared to today, in-state Cal Poly students living on campus fork out an estimated $33,000 a year for the full college experience. Enrollment for the Cal Poly San Luis Obispo campus was 2,200 when it looked like this. Now enrollment is nearly 10 times that at close to 22,000, and from a bird's eye view, the campus looks like this. One woman was part of the 153-person Cal Poly instructional staff in 1953, while today over 600 women teach for the university, making up over 40% of the faculty. Quick fun fact, Cal Poly had an air conditioning and refrigeration engineering department then. To watch I Love Lucy, the #1 show on the tube, you'd need something like this. A GE Black Daylight 19-inch television that set you back about $440, And adjusting for inflation, you could buy 15 of these 65-inch smart TVs from Best Buy. Air travel was much less common then. 50 million people flew via commercial airlines worldwide. Last year, that number was nearly 4 billion. Population growth since the 50s varies from city to city on the coast. For example, Santa Maria has grown by 10 times its size, whereas Santa Barbara has only doubled in size. More people live in Santa Maria today than the number that lived in Santa Barbara County then. San Luis Obispo County has grown by about 5.5 times its size, while Santa Barbara County has shot up by about 4.5%. I'm just watching the original Titanic, released in 1953. No, Leo and Kate aren't playing Jack and Rose. This one featured Barbara Stanwyck and Clifton Webb. This one didn't make as big of a splash at the box office as its counterpart. It made just over $2 million at the box office, while the James Cameron classic from 1997 made over $2 billion. Regardless, I'm going to head back to the original. Reporting in San Luis Obispo, Neil Aber, KSBY News.
And we want to thank you again, our viewers, for making these 70 years so rewarding. And we hope to continue covering stories in your community for another 70 years.
Thank you so much for joining us, and have a good night.